Welcome to the Overlap Review, where we're going to have an in-depth look at the big stories of the week and joined by him and David and Carl from The Athletic. So over to you guys first. Tell us what the big stories are happening in your world in these last few days. Obviously, the transfer window's just closed.
Yes, you should be in hibernation, because that's what you normally do.
Sleeping.
You should be asleep, well earned. I think the big feedback for me looking at transfer was just the comparative financial dominance of the Premier League compared to Europe's top 5 leagues.
Yeah.
Why do they want the Super League in you?
I've always been baffled by this. Why on earth would the Premier League undercut its own competitive edge or financial superiority by joining the Super League? I can only assume they got spooked by thinking that would be a good idea. And after the Paqueta deal from Lyon to West Ham went down, I think I tweeted, the Premier League is paying for things with metal credit cards when everyone else is fumbling pocket change. This is absurd right now that Nottingham Forest can get a player from Atletico Madrid on loan. And I know we often talk about, Arsenal don't have Champions League or Manchester United don't have Champions League. But when you are a club the size of, say, Crystal Palace, and you can bring in a player at the core, or a club the size of Aston Villa, you can bring in Kamara, the competitive shift is slowly getting to the Premier League.
Should we be concerned about the rest of Europe in terms of that gap's getting huge now in terms of our spend compared to the other leagues? Should we be concerned about it, or should we just look after ourselves?
I remember speaking to some contacts at the breakaway European clubs for the proposed Super League and executives at the time it was all happening, and they couldn't believe that the Premier League clubs were coming with them. I mean, they were delighted by that, but if they were in that position, they wouldn't have been doing it because the Premier League is the European Super League and they hate the Premier League for it. They're trying to think of ways to break it apart and to reclaim some ground, and it's not working at the moment.
Who is that trying to break it apart?
Well, it was pretty clear that Real Madrid, Florentino Perez, who was in with them for the breakaway, the most vociferous, Agnelli in Juventus.
Yeah, but is that viable for them in terms of creating this Super League without the Premier League clubs? Would that be possible? Do you think that could be something that could happen going forward?
No, but I think that their theory is that if it's successful enough, lucrative enough, and seducing enough, that maybe the Premier League teams will be tempted to come and join, and football can structure a way that the Premier League teams can stay in their own league and take part in it, and then they would all win at the same time.
I've been, ever since I was a kid and I can remember football or reading about football, people have always mentioned a European Super League, and it's always been one of those things that I've always thought, it's just something that comes up every 2 or 3 years. Do you think right now this is very, very serious and that it could happen? Because I don't envisage ever in the future, whenever I've heard it before years gone by, that you'll just have this European Super League. You'd always have your domestic league and then you'd play in Europe. Now, the Champions League is trying to get bigger group stage, the Swiss format that's coming in where they play the 10 games. I get all that, and trying to make the Champions League bigger. Do you think there's ever going to be a day where this does happen, where your domestic league is not your bread and butter?
It's interesting because you had people like Arsene Wenger, who are far more intelligent than me, saying it would happen, and he was certain. He said it repeatedly while he was Arsenal manager. Something may come about because money normally talks, and these things eventually end up manifesting themselves in some form. But I think the strength of reaction from the public, from governments to the proposed Super League, sent a warning sign that you're probably not going to be able to break apart the leagues, and anything that does happen would have to be some kind of compromise. It was a really sort of telling period that showed the strength of the grassroots, the original game, the various stakeholders. The threat won't go away, and there's enough people who help make the game tick who will continue to push for it, and there will be this struggle. It's interesting that PSG and Nasser Al-Khelaifi almost came away as the saviour of football from a position where he and his club had been sort of portrayed as a threat. It's a really sort of live issue in the back channels of football that's not going away. But personally, I can't see it.
I think UEFA will feel threatened. I don't think domestic... I mean, there's no way they're going to come back and try and... They'll not try and get rid of domestic football because, I mean, in this country, that would just be... We've seen the reaction already. So they won't go for that again. But what I think could come under challenge is UEFA, if UEFA don't dance to their tune in the next period.
Yeah, but the big thing that stands out for me, we're very lucky, and you're all right about, we are the Super League. We're lucky that we've got 6 teams trying to get into the top 4. We've got 6 teams who at the start each season who think they've got a hope of maybe, challenging for the title. But The rest of European leagues are a joke. They are a joke where Bayern Munich win every single season, PSG win every single season. There's a bit of a debate at the moment over the Italian Serie A, but before that, Juventus has won 9 in a row. That's not sustainable for me. So something does have to happen with football, I think, in those.
What about
something's not right.
The imbalance of the transfer spend in this last window? The Premier League outspent all of the other major leagues combined by some distance. I mean, I'm not proposing any restructuring of leagues, but there's something wrong in the balance of the ability to spend. And they're acutely aware of that. Mm-hmm. They're desperately trying to find revenue streams on the continent. And that's why they're staying in this contract that they've signed.
A very good example of this are La Liga's expansion of their own Super Cup and moving the Super Cup from the start of the season to this mid-season semi-finals and final in Saudi Arabia. La Liga is trying 3 or 4 different forms of investment because they desperately want to catch up with the Premier League. So we've seen that with the Super League, Super Cup even. We've also seen their new private equity investment with the company CVC as well. And I think...
Is that for the league though, or for the top teams to compete with us? That's not going to change their domestic league.
Barcelona and Real Madrid always have to be in that Super Cup in Saudi Arabia, don't they?
Yes, that was one of the new changes to the Super Cup and bringing Saudi Arabia. Those 2 teams have to happen. In terms of who benefits from this, I mean, this is a question more in terms of, again, political science. And do you believe in trickle-down economics? I don't know.
Let's discuss that. No, because at the moment, the EFL, English Football League, the other 72 clubs have been trying to get a deal out of the Premier League, an improved distribution deal now for, I think, 3-4 years, well, maybe 25 years, but certainly in the last 3 or 4 years, they've been working hard. They can't get a new distribution deal, even though the government have said to the Premier League, you must deal with the 72 clubs. How can the Premier League spend £1.92 billion in one transfer window and not deal up the EFL? Or, as I think, they're going to try and do it in the next couple of months and try and buy off the regulator in some way. But they can't even do a deal with the lower clubs and the grassroots in this country. You know, why is that? That is just wrong.
It's a very live situation, as you said. And I think you've got a number of parties, and it's not just in terms of finance, but also in terms of, I mean, we talk about player burnout and the players on saying they can't play 60 games a season, and everyone understands you should play less games, but no one wants to agree which games to cut. So you've got loads of different organisations who are all acting in some form of self-interest, who are all coming forward and saying, I'm acting not to the level of self-interest you think I'm acting in, can we do some form of deal? And money talks, and you've got to have loads of conversations, and it's going left and right, and it's very hard to pass. Most of the time, I just pick up the phone and I go, oh, you've already spoken to Ornstein, never mind, and put the phone down.
What are you hearing? What are you hearing then, David?
I think the package is quite close from conversations I've had, and it's being debated in the Premier League executives circle and their shareholder meetings. I think it was possibly reported in the Times by Martin Ziegler that they're almost there and they're looking at the percentages that are going to go down. I had conversations with a number of executives where quite a few weeks ago now, so I thought it might have come about, which is why it's famous last words, because we've been here before and I thought it would have been done by now, but it sounded like they were on the brink of agreeing this deal. And as you say, I presume it's a response to the Tracy Crouch fan-led review in a bid to see off the regulator, which you speak to some in Premier League circles and they think it would be a good thing to an extent as long as they have some control over it, and others are dead against it. But I think that threat shows the power of action. No, certain clubs and certain executives who have created their sort of hegemony and don't want it to be broken.
Give us more.
Well, no. I think it's quite clear that those who have profited most from the Premier League, not only the teams who have been competing towards the top, but those who come up from the Championship into untold riches, and their wage bill and their spending is distorted to an ungodly level. Look at what's happening at Nottingham Forest. The idea that some of these teams would then go back down into the pack is unpalatable. And so when they're part of the top 20 and some of these proposals are mooted that the independent regulator would bring about, it's something that you don't want to vote for. Turkey's voting for Christmas. But I do sense a growing understanding that something on the redistribution has to be done. And I thought in recent weeks it was close. Perhaps as
let's hope it is.
Yeah.
So move on to Chelsea. I'm baffled by the £4.25 billion transaction. I'm baffled by the spending this summer. The thing that baffles me is that the American investment funds and families are very smart. They know what they're doing. How do they think they're going to make money out of Chelsea when they've already spent £4.25 billion and they're spending the level of money they've spent on players? Do you see something that I don't? Because I feel it just feels far too rich for me.
When this takeover was happening of Chelsea, there were a lot of soundings from journalists and writers more informed than me about this sort of takeover thing that suggested that the investors around the world, who seemed to be clamouring for Chelsea, we were hearing of more than 200 expressions of interest that got whittled down to a relatively small number, and then there was a final shortlist. And these are some of the, biggest investment funds in sport. And you had Sir Jim Radcliffe in at the last minute, and you had the various families from American sports who were ready to go with incredible amounts of money. The message we were receiving was that these investors see the Premier League ready to explode. I think they see untapped potential to a vast degree in terms of bite-sized clips, in terms of sponsorships, in terms of brand development around the world, merchandising, the way that you've seen it at, the Dodgers, who was the other family that was in for Chelsea that have developed Wrigley Field, the Chicago Cubs. Yes. The thirst for the Premier League in Asia, in Australasia, in Europe, in Scandinavia, in North and South America. So I don't think that they feel that the ownership, the league has, despite its exponential growth, have gone anywhere near where they're able to go. And these are the guys that want it to be realised.
Is Tuchel happy? Is something happening there? What do you think?
Thomas Tuchel's had a lot of issues to deal with on and off the pitch, and it's been a difficult time. He's carried Chelsea on his shoulders during a takeover, and he's had to be involved in areas of a football club that a coach shouldn't really be involved in. And he, I think, went on the record to say that he would rather not be involved in. He wants to be training this team up, and you can see it, I think, in him. There will be some tension there, no doubt. Hopefully for Chelsea, healthy tension.
Who's his tension with?
Well, you've got a new ownership group led front-facing by Todd Bowley. It's very unique to have co-owner, chairman and acting sporting director.
What's he like? I called him football manager because he's just wandering around. It seems like a bizarre sort of summer for Chelsea. But what's he like? Have you spoke to him?
No, I haven't. But everybody I've spoken to who has dealt with him, whether it be in negotiations or contract talks or interaction within stadiums and outside and in meetings and dinners or at the Connaught where he's been pitching up by all accounts in London, say he's a very intelligent guy.
Is it 3-star, the Connaught? Is it? Oh.
Well, yeah. More my level than his.
But you think? I think Thomas. I'm a huge admirer of Thomas Tuchel, but it'd be interesting to see what this regime is like to Abramovich, because if Abramovich was in charge now, I think a lot of people will be talking about Tuchel's job, even though I think that's nonsense. But you know how ruthless Roman Abramovich was in the past. But when you think of managers who are maybe trying to jump to the elite, how do you view Graham Potter? And what would his chances of getting, a young English coach, of getting that sort of bigger job? Do you think that's possible now?
I'm smiling from it. I think Graham Potter's fantastic. He's a keen tactical mind. I was witness to one of his better moments where they absolutely obliterated Manchester United, unfortunately. And he spoke very eloquently. And he was asked that question about, do you think you can link to things afterwards? And he sort of smiled and went, I saw my name being linked to the Tottenham Hotspur job, which was quite weird because they have only just got a new Tottenham Hotspur manager. What's going on there? I think Graham Potter is very aware of his place within the footballing ecosystem. I think he speaks quite plainly about how good Brighton are. Something that really struck me was he said, if Brighton want to get to where they want to be, not everyone here, so this was last season, he said, not everyone here is going to be here eventually. That was talking not just on players like Cucurella who's going to go to Chelsea, but also players that perhaps, when you are 11th, aren't going to be good enough if you are 6th. And the fact he can talk that practically, and the fact he's using a lot of the managerial buzzwords like alignment and progressing the sort of players and developing players is quite interesting as well.
What about your ex-manager, Brendan Rodgers?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. He's talking a lot.
We'd have to try and get Graham Potter if something happened there.
Yeah, but for Brendan, it was funny last season because I deal with a couple of Leicester fans on social media, And they were very frustrated last season, and Leicester still finished 8th. And I'm a bit like, where are Leicester supposed to finish? Well, Rodgers' 3 full seasons, I think, have been 2 5th-place finishes, 8th, FA Cup and a Community Shield, which, you know, since Jose came in, you know, managers count that as a trophy. So he'll say he's won 2 trophies. So, but where they are right now, they shouldn't be there with that squad. But when you're listening to him, it just feels to me like he's had enough. I mean, is that what you're hearing?
I don't feel he's had enough, but I can sense the frustration, and it feels like it's snowballing. They're bottom of the league. They play Aston Villa in what's an incredibly important match for both clubs and managers.
Do you think if he loses that, they'll make a change? Or well, there's one more game to the international break.
From what I hear, from when I speak to the people sort of that make these decisions and know how these mechanics work in football, they're saying this international break could be quite telling for a number of Premier League managers, especially with the World Cup so close as well.
Which clubs?
Look, there are delicate situations at Leicester. And just on that context, whatever's happened with the lack of investment this summer, Brendan Rodgers is an FA Cup winner with Leicester City, Community Shield winner, pushing for Champions League football. I remember how aggressively some at Arsenal wanted to appoint him when they went for Unai Emery. And when he won the FA Cup, the messages I got from those people saying, told you he was a top coach. You don't get in the frame for Man City, Liverpool previously, Man United and others. Tottenham, he's been linked with very heavily as well, if you're no good. I'm a massive fan of Brendan Rodgers, and I don't understand what's gone wrong there with that squad and that ownership and the investment. Aston Villa and Steven Gerrard, it's not going right for them at the moment. That was a really impressive result against Manchester City. But
how delicate is that situation? Because I spoke about that at the weekend in a newspaper column.
Got some stick.
And I felt, that it was more a case of the Man City game went well for them in the end, but even you wouldn't have expected that to happen. But the next 4 games are pivotal. Do you think it's actually it's closer than that?
I think he's got credit in the bank, especially because he was an appointment of Christian Purslow. They had a relationship previously at Liverpool, and he made a really good impression at Rangers. But if you look at the bare facts, it didn't finish well last season, and it's not started well this season. A controversial, some would say unnecessary decision to strip Tyrone Mings of the captaincy and then drop him for the Bournemouth game. Bournemouth game went wrong, he brought him back in. They've changed central defenders pretty much every match for selection decision or for injury. And with their trajectory and with that international break approaching and with the ambition of those owners, you do pay attention to that situation and realise that if it gets much worse, questions need to be asked.
You know, when you talk about sort of Leicester Villa, you said there was a number of clubs. Let's say there's another 3 or 4 clubs in that situation.
Yeah.
If you get rid of someone, you've got to think something's getting lined up. Is the fact Pochettino at this moment hasn't got a club, is that a big problem?
Pochettino would only go to a top 6 club. He's not going to go below that, is he?
I think he would consider it for the right project.
He would?
Yeah.
But what?
Villa's a big club.
I think
Mauricio Pochettino's not going to go to Aston Villa.
Why not?
No, but what I'm saying is, I think...
I love Aston Villa as a club, but...
Genuinely, why not?
I don't feel... I think Mauricio Pochettino, having had Tottenham, having had Paris Saint-Germain, as aspirations will be higher than Villa.
But what's
But the things
available now,
Mauricio
top 6? He can't go to Arsenal.
He'll have to wait for one of the top
the
6
things-
or 7. You know, he'll have to
the
wait for
things
Newcastle or a top
Pochettino
6
are
clubs to
good
come
at-
available.
Surely the things Pochettino are good at are better suited to a smaller club with more reasonable ambitions.
When he built at Espanyol, built at Southampton,
Yes.
built at Tottenham.
I'm
before
asking you
they
the
got
question.
to-
You
why did
genuinely
say
believe he will?
Newcastle in there?
So I think that the next manager of Newcastle that will go, I think Eddie Howe will do a job for a couple of years at Newcastle, maybe longer. But I think at a certain point they'll bring in a manager that will be a Pochettino or a different.
But Wes Edens and Nassef Sawiris at Aston Villa are as ambitious as any of those clubs. And they've got the history as a European Cup winner. And I don't think somebody like Maurizio Pochettino, I'm not trying to link him to this job in any way, shape
You
or
are.
form.
Very sorry.
I am not. I don't think he would discount an Aston Villa.
Right, thank you all for the more in-depth look at some of football's big issues, and join us next time on the Overlap Review.